Hello, book lovers, and welcome to Book Talk Radio Club. My name is Claire Perkins, and today I'm talking to author Harry A. Milman. Harry is the author of Sawyer's The Final Flight, a sci-fi novel, and A Death at Camp David, a political whodunit that won Best in Mysteries in Book Talk Radio Club's 2018 awards. Today, however, we will be discussing his most recently published book, Forensics: The Science Behind the Death of Famous People. Forensics is an analysis and description of how coroners determine the cause and manner of death. An investigation of 23 deaths of famous people was conducted based on a review of publicly available autopsy and toxicology reports, as well as published scientific and lay articles. Hello, Harry. Thank you for coming to talk to me on Book Talk Radio Club.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Carrie Fisher, also known as Princess Leia from Star Wars, had been abusing cocaine and other pharmaceuticals for many years. So when it was announced that she died from sleep apnea, you were skeptical. Firstly, Harry, why were you skeptical? And secondly, what is sleep apnea?
So let's talk about Carrie Fisher for a moment. Carrie Fisher, was a well-known actress, but she was known to have to be abusing drugs for many years. She spoke about it, and so it was very public. However, what's not known is that she suffered from sleep apnea. Now, sleep apnea is a sleep disorder whereby you stop breathing for a few seconds at a time, and then you start again. And there are a couple of reasons for that. It could be due to, for example, problems with your respiratory system in terms of the breathing apparatus, or it could be due to what they call a central sleep apnea, which is a disturbance, a neurological disturbance between the brain and the mechanism for breathing, so that the information is not transferred correctly between the brain and the sleep centers in the brain and the breathing apparatus. Or it could be a combination of those two. So we don't know exactly which one Carrie Fisher had, but she had sleep apnea where she stopped breathing and she would stop and she would start, and she also exhibited the sleep apnea the day that she had her medical emergency aboard the plane. She was suffering from sleep apnea aboard the plane.
Right.
Now, the reason I was skeptical when the coroner determined that she died from sleep apnea is because I wasn't aware that sleep apnea could cause death, because you don't really stop breathing, you just stop breathing for a few seconds.
Yeah.
And second of all, she was known to abuse drugs, so the more likely explanation would have been that she died from a drug overdose. But the coroner concluded that the cause of her death was sleep apnea, but the manner of her death was undetermined.
A review of the medical examiner's report revealed that the Fisher family refused to give permission for an autopsy and toxicology test to be done. So, constrained by these limitations, the coroner labelled the manner of death undetermined. So what do you actually think caused her death, Harry?
Yeah, so it's important for your listeners to understand the difference between cause of death and manner of death. So cause of death is a biological explanation of why a person died. For example, they stopped breathing or they had a heart attack is one reason. But manner of death, and that's the area where all conspiracy theories lie, there are 5 categories for manner of death. One is natural, second accidental, homicide, suicide, and if none of those fit, then it would be undetermined. So you can see that's a medical legal explanation as opposed to a biological explanation. And so in this case, we have the coroner indicated manner of death was undetermined, and that is because there were a lot of he had a lot of constraints placed on him by the family in how he can conduct the tests. So he couldn't do an autopsy. The toxicology had to be done on blood samples that were provided by the hospital, because she didn't die aboard the plane. She died 3 days later. And so he had a lot of constraints, and that's why there wasn't enough. He didn't have enough information to conclude on the manner of death, and he labeled it undetermined. And because of that, of course, I can't, for the same reasons, I can't conclude what her death was, because the cause of her death, because there's a lot of missing information. We don't know. We don't know some of the drugs that she had in the system. We certainly can't quantify, and without being able to quantify the drugs that were in her system, we don't know, for example, if they were in the overdose range, and how much, and how they might have contributed to sleep apnea. One thing I could say, however, is that there was indication that she had drugs in the system that were respiratory depressants and central nervous system depressants. So, and these would be things like opioids, for example, or morphine. So, knowing that she had sleep apnea, which could have a neurological disturbance of the respiratory systems in the brain, in combination with drugs that cause respiratory depression in general, which is a neurological symptom, then the combination of those drugs and her sleep apnea could have been put her over the edge,
right,
and assisted in her death. However, again, I'll just qualify that without the additional information, it's difficult to say.
Harry, you've investigated 23 deaths of famous people in your book, amongst them being Errol Flynn, Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, Karen Carpenter and Heath Ledger. So a mix of generations, ages and genres. May I ask why you chose these particular people?
So my first interest, Carrie Fisher was the first one. She kind of piqued my interest, and then I was able to get her autopsy, so I was able to review that, and then I added people, famous people to the list. It started off with famous people that I was able to obtain autopsies for, and so I had the information. I could do the evaluation and review, and then after that, I added other individuals that I didn't have the autopsy for, but I researched them based on information that was readily available in the public domain, either news articles, scientific papers, YouTube videos, and the like. That's how my whole list was generated, and as it turns out, they were all related to, in one form or another, to the entertainment industry. And the other thing I wanted to do was to give it a good mix, so that some of these celebrities were well known for the older generation, and others were better known for the younger generation, so that this way all the readers would have some interest in the book.
Good idea. Well, let's talk about Marilyn Monroe, perhaps one of the most famous women in the world, and a death that had no end of conspiracy theories behind it. Some believe she was murdered by the President of the United States and his brother, the Attorney General, or possibly by the Mafia, or even by the CIA. Others thought her death was a suicide committed by a lonely and insecure woman who was unable to cope with the demands of the film industry. Still others wondered whether it was an unfortunate accident that had gone awry. It was a question you were determined to investigate and whose answer you hoped to put at rest once and for all. So what was your conclusion?
So as you noted, all these various theories were all related to the manner of death. And the manner of death in the end was concluded to be a suicide, and I agreed with that. And the reason, and that was a suicide due to taking a drug overdose. And the reason I agreed with that conclusion by the coroner is because there was an empty. She had one empty bottle of a barbiturate by her bedside, and another one, a tranquilizer, was about half empty. And those drugs were found in her system later in the toxicology analysis. And as far as the suicide, it's because there was plenty of evidence to suggest that it was a suicide. She was found in her bedroom, alone in her bedroom with the door locked from the inside. She was alone. She had previously done this before, She had tried suicide by drug overdoses before. There were a number of reasons why she would have, and of course she would have. These were all. She had taken all these drugs. These were all pills. So it wasn't. There was no evidence that somebody gave it to her. That she would have had to take it herself. There was no evidence of injection or any other route of exposure. So in the end, I agreed with the coroner that her death was a suicide.
Heath Ledger, a wonderfully talented Australian actor, not even 30 years old, found unconscious in his bed by his housekeeper. A representative from the office of the Chief Medical Examiner of the City of New York said Mr. Heath Ledger died as the result of acute intoxication by the combined effects of, here we go, I'm going to try and pronounce these properly, oxycodone, hydrocodone, diazepam, temazepam, alprazolam, and doxylamine. Hope I did that okay. That's a heck of a cocktail of drugs. I take it they're not lethal usually. For what are they normally prescribed?
So you did a very good job pronouncing those names, even though you're not scientifically inclined.
Thank you.
But basically all these drugs are either opioids of some manner, tranquilizers, or the last one, doxylamine, is a antihistamine.
Okay.
So the antihistamine is found in cold preparations, for example, and the opioids and tranquilizers. The opioids tend to be for pain. They can also put you to sleep, and the tranquilizers, as the name suggests, are to sedate you. Now, Heath Ledger has been suffering from insomnia for many years, and he has been taking pharmaceuticals to help him sleep. So in that sense, it was not surprising that he had something to help him sleep, in his system. Yeah. However, and all these drugs that were in his system were all at therapeutic range. The problem is, of course, that they all had similar side effects, that is to say, sedation and respiratory depression and central nervous system depression. So even though each one of them alone would not have been an overdose and would not have caused his death, in combination, where they all, including the antihistamine, they all have a similar side effect, that's to say, sedation and respiratory depression. Yeah. So in combination, it puts him over the top and causes death.
It's very sad.
And we call that polypharmacy as opposed to overdose, because each one of these drugs was in therapeutic range, but when combined, they can cause death.
You say at the end of the chapter about Heath Ledger's death, and I quote, "It is tempting to speculate what might have been had Ledger lived, but it would be an exercise in futility. Extremely talented with an on-screen charisma, Ledger was serious about his craft. It all comes down to being willing to be taught," he said in a Vanity Fair interview on the set of The Patriot. "The day I stop having fun, I'll just walk away." Unfortunately, he never got a chance to see that day. It's so sad. I mean, there seems to be something that people have labelled as a curse called the 27 Club. Brian Jones, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin and Jim Morrison all died at the age of 27 between 1969 and 1971. At the time, the coincidence gave rise to some comment, but it wasn't until Kurt Cobain's 1994 death at age 27 that the idea of a 27 began to catch on in public perception. Have you heard of the 27 Club, Harry?
Actually, I have not until I started researching for this book. And of course, it's a coincidence in one manner, but on the other hand, all these are individuals who are, they're all in the entertainment field. They all have similar interests in terms of music or entertainment, and apparently all got into pharmaceuticals and drugs, and illicit drugs. So it's unfortunate, but and I think it's more of a coincidence. But someone coined that term, and then it caught on.
Talking of the 27 Club, let's discuss Amy Winehouse. Such a very talented singer. What a voice. But what a mess, mentally, physically, and emotionally, poor woman. A heavy drinker, Amy Winehouse was thought at first to have died from a drug overdose, but apparently she died from alcohol poisoning. What is alcohol poisoning? I mean, we all have a drink or three every now and then, but it must take a huge amount to kill you.
Yeah, so Amy Winehouse, when they did the autopsy and the toxicology studies, they didn't find any drugs in the system, only alcohol.
Mm.
And the alcohol in her system was at 5 times the legal limit. And now, to get 5 times the legal limit, now the legal limit, just for everybody to know, for driving is at 0.08, and she had over 0.4, over 0.41 to be exact. So it's about 8 times. About 5 times the legal limit.
Wow.
So the way you get that. So what does that mean? Well, what it means is that you're at that amount of alcohol, you're overwhelming the liver to metabolize the alcohol and to have it excreted from your body. So it takes about 45 minutes to 1 hour to eliminate 1 glass of wine, from a standard glass of wine or a standard small glass of liquor. It takes an hour. So in this case, if you're binge drinking, for example, 10 or 12 glasses, within the hour, your blood levels of alcohol will tend to rise much faster than if you drank the same 10 or 12 glasses over some period of time, like 4 or 5 hours. So if you binge drinking and you increase your blood alcohol level to that level so quickly, then the liver does not have enough time to metabolize the alcohol and the kidneys to excrete it. And now what happens is that your blood levels of alcohol are very high, and that kind of level in such a short period of time will cause your breathing apparatus to shut down, your heart rate to decrease, your body temperature to drop, and then eventually, you could die.
Sad. Now let's go to the death of Bernay Ramsey, an American child beauty queen who was killed at the age of 6. I'm not too sure how many people outside of the USA have heard of her, but perhaps you could tell us about her shocking death, and your conclusion.
So Bernay Ramsey, she was in 1996. She was a 6-year-old daughter of the Ramseys, the Patsy and John Ramsey, and they were an affluent couple in the Denver, Colorado area. And Patsy Ramsey, the mother, she had been a beauty queen herself. She was Miss West Virginia in 1977, and so you can see how she had an affinity for beauty pageants. And so when her daughter Bernay Ramsey was born, she decided to put her in beauty contests. So by 1996, when Bernay Ramsey was 60 years old, by then she had already been in about 8 beauty contests, and won several of them. And just a few days prior to Christmas of 1996, she had won Little Miss Christmas pageant. So now on Christmas night of 1996, the family attended a party, and then they came back at that night. And by the next morning, Patsy Ramsey, the mother, finds a ransom letter saying that Bernay has been abducted, and they wanted $118,000, and it was a long, rambling ransom letter. Just to get to the bottom line, they looked all over the house for the child, and eventually found her in the basement. And the police questioned the family. By the family, I mean the parents and Bernay's brother. She had a brother, and of course, like any other homicide, the parents and the family, it's usually the first suspects. And so for several years, the parents were accused, as well as the brother, were accused of being the perpetrators of the death of John Bernay Ramsey, because they found her body. Maybe I didn't mention that, but they found her body in the basement of the house. And so she wasn't abducted. They found her body in the basement of the house, and the family was accused of murdering the daughter for many years. Today, they still don't know who killed John Bernay Ramsey. So there were the parents, there was the brother, and there's potentially a suspect as what they call an intruder. I'm not going to go into the details of the conclusions because I think your listeners would like to read that in the book.
Fair enough.
All that is discussed as to who could have killed John Bernay Ramsey,
right,
and what is the evidence to support that. It's all in the book.
Whitney Houston, also a shocking death, although having said that, in the last few years before her death, she wasn't looking a normal, beautiful self. She was found in the bathroom, lying face down in the bathtub. It was known that she abused cocaine, and people speculated that alcohol must have contributed to Houston's death by making her so sedated that she slid under the water and drowned. However, there was a different explanation for how she died. What was it that killed her?
So, as I indicated earlier, there's the cause of death and manner of death, and so the cause of death was definitely concluded to be drowning in the bathtub. In this case, I agreed with the coroners, and I provide reasoning for it in the book. The issues that some people wondered about, some people in the public wondered about, was how is it possible that she drowned? There must have been a reason for why she drowned in the bathtub. So some of the possibilities were alcohol. She was drinking alcohol that sedated her, and she wound up under the water. Maybe drugs, because Whitney Houston was known to take cocaine. Did she suffer a heart attack? And that was another possibility that people were proposing. So any one of these as a possibility for why she drowned. I discuss all of that in the book, and I suggest that your listeners would read all that in the book and maybe formulate their own opinions.
Harry, you're a consulting pharmacologist and toxicologist. What are these specialities and what do they involve?
So there's a very clear relationship between pharmacology and toxicology. Pharmacology is, and if we just talk about drugs as opposed to industrial chemicals, so pharmacology is a science of drugs mechanisms, and basically you study absorption, distribution, elimination, and metabolism of drugs at therapeutic levels. Toxicology is very similar, except that all the study is being done at higher levels, that is to say above therapeutic levels in the toxic range. So you study the same thing, distribution, elimination, metabolism, and absorption of drugs, but then you want to see at higher doses, doses that are toxic.
So how did you get into these two fields? Was it something you decided you wanted to do early on in life?
So my first degree was, my bachelor's was in pharmacy, and my master's was in pharmaceutics as well. And by that time, I recognized that I was not interested in working in a drugstore for the rest of my life. And I was interested in research. And my first job, after being in pharmacy for a while, my first job was as a junior scientist in the Laboratory of Toxicology at the National Institutes of Health in Maryland.
It sounds fascinating. You're also...
And I'm sorry, I was taking a glass of water.
Oh, please, carry on.
And so that was laboratory toxicology, and I was doing research in pharmacology, toxicology, biochemistry. And that's how I got interested in those fields. And my job basically put me through a PhD program at a local university in pharmacology, and the rest is history. But that's pretty much how it all began.
You're also an expert witness with over 40 years of experience at the US Environmental Protection Agency, the US National Cancer Institute, the National Institute of Health, and the US Public Health Service. It sounds fascinating, but what does an expert witness do?
So I've been doing expert witness work now for over 20 years. That means I assist attorneys in litigation.
Right.
So whenever somebody decides to sue, for example, a doctor or a hospital, or they claim that some chemical in the product caused their cancer, for example, or anything to do with drugs or chemicals, then eventually they need an expert to link their exposure to the chemicals or drugs with the ultimate health effect, whether it's death or overdose. And that's where I come in. So I'm the expert in drugs and chemicals, and I assist attorneys, and to date I've assisted in over 300 cases, defense and plaintiff, drugs and chemicals, and they run the gamut of all kinds of cases, both criminal and civil, drugs, product liability, medical malpractice, drug overdoses, and the like.
It sounds so interesting. I'm surprised you actually hadn't written Forensics, the Science Behind the Death of Famous People, before your other books. Will there be another book analysing the deaths of more famous people, or is this just a one-off?
So this is my first nonfiction book, and it's been very well received by readers all over the world, and they're all asking me the same question: will I put out another one? They all want me to put another one, and I'm certainly considering another nonfiction. One possibility is to put another famous people book, part 2, if you will. Another one which I was considering was maybe one related to with examples of all my cases that I've been working on. So it would be the maybe 25 or 30 different cases, and I would explain the toxicology and the science in each case and how they arrived at the conclusions for defense or the plaintiff side. So those are a couple ideas that I had. I haven't started either one of them, so I'm still open, but those are some of the ideas that I'm having.
I see you're already receiving wonderful reviews for Forensics, the Science Behind the Death of Famous People, including fascinating look at the science behind the deaths of famous people, written for laymen. And also, this book was such an enjoyable read. The way each chapter flows with a short history, medical findings and summary was so refreshing and intriguing. So finally, Harry, I have to ask you, where can Book Talk Radio Club's listeners purchase Forensics, the Science Behind the Death of Famous People?
So this book is available in hardcover, softcover, and ebook, either on Kindle or Nook, through many online stores. The most famous ones in the United States is Barnes & Noble and Amazon. Overseas, we have Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Kobo, iTunes, and many others, as well as the book's website, which is www.forensicsfamouspeople.com.
Wonderful. All right, well, thank you, Harry. That was very interesting. Please come back on Book Talk Radio Club soon. I'd love to chat and hear more. In the meantime, good luck for the future. And thank you, everyone, for listening to Book Talk Radio Club. Thanks very much, Harry.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. Bye now.